Fathers of Reddit, what is the best way you have messed with a daughter's boyfriend when meeting him? I told him I don't know what a potato is. I asked him for 3 forms of ID. He was 14. Look, I don't know what you are into, but, you know, I was the first guy who she ever pissed on and I still cherish that memory. IDK, the first thing my ex's dad said to me was, you can sleep in my daughter's bed tonight, and I replied thanks, you too, because I was too nervous. Well, when he came over I got my shotgun out and, actually, I shook his hand and said, pleased to meet you, because I'm not an insecure duckhead who thinks of his daughters as property. I'm the daughter. Dad and his best friend dress up in speedos, mowed the lawn, BBQ'd, held hands, sang horribly off key together, and nicknamed the poor soul Mick Big Mac. He stopped hanging out with me after that. Dad and his best friend still do weird shit like this together, and they are my favorite people. I wasn't the father, I was the boyfriend. I wanted to take my girlfriend out to see a movie, but she said that I had to meet her dad first. Her dad runs the local farmers market, so I had to stop by that morning. Luckily, it was winding down because after an awkward hello he put his hand on my shoulder and led me around and introduced me to everyone at all the stands. Now, for an introvert as myself, this would have been bad enough. But no, as he was introducing me to everyone, he used random female names for me. Hi there, so and so. This here's Stephanie and he's taking my daughter on her first date. Hey guys, meet Martha. He's taking my daughter out. It was kind of funny afterwards. Called him the wrong name, the whole time. The same name, on purpose. My daughter just turned 8. I am here for notes. Opens notepad. Begin. Beat him up in Battlefield and a few other video games. I'm almost 50 and have been a gamer since my early teens. I have more experience with games than he has. A mate was arrested for drug possession by his girlfriend's police officer father. He was going to be introduced to the family that weekend anyway. Would have loved to been a fly on the wall that evening. Was the boyfriend. Walked into the cleaning the guns gag. He asked, what are your intentions with my daughter? And without missing a beat, because I sometimes lack a filter, I replied, depends. What do you think I can get away with? Her mother laughed so hard she dropped a glass and broke it. This wasn't my dad, but my brother. I brought my BF home for a week over the summer. We are in college and live in separate states when not at school, and I was very excited for him to meet my family. I had already met his and they were pretty cool. My parents were very nice and normal to him, but when we sat down for dinner that night, my brother, who is 2 years younger than me, came downstairs, chatted normally for a bit, then said, wait here. He runs up to his room and comes back down about 5 minutes later with a stack of papers and a pen, and sets it down in front of my BF. It's a quiz. It was a quiz. A little quiz that he had typed out. He made him put his name and the date and everything. The questions were divided into 3 categories: sports, music, and movies. They were all things my brother considered vital for my BF to know if he ever wanted to truly belong to my family. My BF, being the cool guy that he is, took it all in stride, and only got 2 wrong on the whole 30-question quiz, with no preparation or studying at all. My family was suitably impressed, and he's still around a year and a half later. The first time I met my girlfriend's father, he picked us both up and was driving us to his house so we could stay the weekend. After a few minutes of driving he told us he had to make a stop on the way there. He pulled up outside a house that looked like there was some work being done on it, and one of the guys came up to the car and said hello. My girlfriend's dad handed over this fat envelope of cash to the guy, and the guy gave him a clear blue plastic bag full of this white powder, which my girlfriend's dad threw in the back with us. At this point I'm pretty freaked the duck out because I'm fairly convinced that my girlfriend's dad just paid a load of money for a bag full of sugar, but I try to act cool. My girlfriend's dad is like, I can't trust you not to say anything, right? And I'm like, yeah, sure, because I don't want to get ducking killed or something. So about 15 minutes later into the journey my girlfriend just bursts out laughing and they tell me it was all just a prank. My girlfriend's dad owned the property being worked on and had to pay the workers for it and had staged that the worker was gonna give him a big bag of washing powder to freak me out. It was a pretty hilarious and harmless prank and we laugh about it now. He's a cool guy. I will wordlessly toss a freshly killed fish at him. If he catches it, he can stay for a time. I had a boyfriend named Nelson. My dad took great pleasure in doing Nelson's laugh from The Simpsons whenever my boyfriend came over. We didn't last long lol. No matter what the boy's name is, shake his hand politely and say it's great to see you again, Jared. Note, this has not been tested with a boy actually named Jared yet. Obligatory not a father, but my co-worker just walked up to his daughter's new boyfriend, took a picture of his face with his phone and said maybe good to have and walked away. My dad is very good at deadpanning. Upon meeting my boyfriend, dad told him that he was too tall. He is almost 7 feet. He wasn't sure if my dad was messing with him or was actually serious. I had to explain later that a good portion of what dad says should be taken with a grain of salt. Boyfriend, now husband, came over to meet her extended family for Thanksgiving. Sat down next to her uncle. He looks over at me and says, "I'm gay, you know," and stares at me. I replied back with "me too," and moved closer to him, practically sat on his lap. I like this guy. Been married to her for 2 years and been together for 8 years now. Her family is hilarious. The first time I met my ex's dad, he had just had surgery. I think I was 15 at the time. And while I was waiting for her, he asked me if I would go into the study and put on some music and make him a drink. I got him a single Jameson with 1 ice cube because that's what my Irish family members drank and I knew he was a Hibernian. And I put on a Fleetwood Mac record because he had an awesome player set up. That was him testing me apparently. He told me later that I passed because I didn't just plug my phone into their auxiliary cord and grab him a beer. I hung out with him once way later on after his daughter and I had broken up, and he ordered me a Jameson with a single ice cube on his way out of the bar. I'm Korean. I play StarCraft. He's gonna have to beat me on the Hunter's map to get permission for the first date. Yes, old school broad was StarCraft. My dad has told every single one of the guys I've brought home, even if they were just friends, that he's not afraid to go back to jail. My dad has never been to jail. Not a daughter, but whenever I brought boys home, my dad would give him one of those little Christian comic books on the evils of homosexuality called The Gay Blade. I attached his genitals to a car battery with gator clips because I'm a ducked up arsehole who likes to dictate my daughter's sex life and live vicariously through men that duck her. Brother to the sister that brought him home. My old man wrote his name on a 12-gauge shell and set it on the mantle above the fireplace and said nothing. It was about halfway through dinner before he noticed it. I've never seen a face get so white so quick in all my life. They're married now. Shell is still sitting there. I have one my dad did. I had the first boyfriend come over. I was 14 for Halloween. And my dad, a butcher, was unwrapping bones for our 3 dogs as a treat. My BF walked over to my dad, who was using a knife, a great big one, to cut the shrink wrap off of them, and asked what those bones were from. My dad, looking BF dead in the eye, pulled a sharpening steel out of the bucket on the counter and sharpened the blade on the already sharp knife in swift movements and said, "Wadlimable's old boyfriend." BF went sheet white and dumped me the next day. Thanks, Dad. Well, my current girlfriend told me about how her dad answered the door to her junior year homecoming date, her first boyfriend, with a shotgun on his shoulder. 5 years later, I visited her at her parents' house for the first time. I had met them briefly when they visited us at university, so I knew them a little bit. When I pulled into their driveway, she texted me to come in through the garage door and knock with a smiley face at the end. I figured her dad was going to pull the same thing on me. Turns out it was just so their dogs wouldn't freak out. She answered the door and her dad greeted me shortly after with a warm handshake and a plethora of snacks he had made in preparation for the football games that afternoon. I felt at home pretty quickly. Not a father, but if I have a daughter I want to dress like a clown and say I'm off to work. When I brought my first real boyfriend home for dinner for the first time, I forgot to mention that my dad was also home for dinner. He's a policeman and comes home for meals, so we rock up and there's a police car in the driveway. It's normal for me, but my boyfriend's face was literally, edit, spelling. I was going hunting the next morning with my brother and brother-in-law, so I had several guns and boxes of ammo out. My daughter walked in with her boyfriend, introduced him, and I asked where they were going, what time they would be back, etc. And he told me. With that, I said, catch, and tossed a bullet to him. He caught it, looked at it, looked back at me, and I said, it moves a lot faster after midnight. Have a good one. Was the boyfriend. Wanted to take GF on a date, but she said her dad had to meet me first. He was a single dad, so it's not like her mom would have been there to hold him back or anything, and dude was pretty buff. My GF goes in her room while her dad sits me down on the couch and sits across from me, not saying a word but looking straight into my eyes the whole time. 15-year-old me was pretty shaken. He finally says, I'm going to make this short. Anything you do to my daughter, I'm going to do to you. We just held hands that day. Boyfriend of a girl with 2 dads. I've yet to meet her real father and she doesn't want me to. He's a huge D that cheated on her mom, then fled across the country. Her stepdad I see on a somewhat regular basis. He's a character, that's for sure. We told our parents about our relationship about 2-3 weeks ago, and first thing he does is shake my hand with a grip that's way too hard for normal, then takes me aside and asks what my intentions is with his daughter. While asking this, he's gripping his hand around my neck. It should be noted I'm a big kid. I'm 6'1" and like 200 pounds. I'm not easily intimidated. At that moment this man scared the shit out of me. As I was trying to muster up an answer, he drops his hand and hugs me and tells me he's messing with me and that I should have seen my face. Needless to say, she doesn't like him much either. Daughter here. First time I bring my BF to my hometown, we visit my parents. My mom tries to stuff him with food while my dad excitedly describes the great deal he got on my sister's new car. My boyfriend comes to join me in the middle of this and my dad stops, looks him dead in the eye, and excitedly says, wanna see something cool? He then proceeds to get on the computer and turns the screen to my boyfriend and I. We are greeted with a picture of my dad when he was 21, buff, shirtless, and flexing. I begin to cover my face in embarrassment as my dad looks excitedly at my boyfriend for a response. My boyfriend simply says, you look good, man. Pretty sure my dad did this to embarrass me instead of mess with my boyfriend, but did put him in a pickle for a second there. My boyfriend now makes jokes about how hot my dad is just to embarrass me more. I am a daughter, and I do not have any funny father stories, but I do have one badass mom story. My house has the front door on the 2nd floor, and our front steps are large and can be intimidating. All friends were required to come inside and introduce themselves before I could get in their car and leave with them. So I had a date with a popular boy, douchebag, and he texted me that he was there to pick me up and to come outside. I told him that he has to come meet my parents, and he did, although awkwardly and rudely. Long story short, he was incredibly disrespectful towards me and I was back home within 30 minutes. Later that evening, my mother messaged him on Facebook, you are the rudest boy to ever walk up the front steps to my house. Shortly after, I got a large apology text from the boy. My mother didn't tell me about the message he sent until at least 6 months later. It was awesome. Hopefully one day something like this from Bad Boys II. I was greeted once by a dad trying to look like he was sharpening a saw on a pole, like you use for cutting branches. Was more concerned than intimidated. My dad threatened to smash his windows in with a baseball bat. It was a friend from school who was obviously gay and had come to work on a project. Lord knows what he'll do when I actually bring home a boyfriend. People who don't realize that fathers don't do this because they think of their daughters as objects, but because this is a rite of passage for young men and it is the responsibility of elder males to scare the shit out of boyfriends for funsies. I went to tell my new father-in-law that I was serious with his daughter and intended to marry her. He interpreted it as me asking for his permission, and told me now isn't the right time, maybe in a few years. That really messed me up. Good guy. Language barrier. It all worked out in the end. We hosted a beautiful teenaged exchange student for a year. When a boy came to take her to a dance, I looked down at him and said, in roughly these words, I am responsible for her right now, but her real father is even bigger than me, and you don't want to do anything that would piss off both of us. My daughters are 2 and 4. When my oldest was born, I started working out again. I've found the best inspiration on days when I'm feeling lazy is to imagine myself as some nearly mythical titan ripping the door off its hinges to greet some poor kid intent on taking my daughter on a date. So my plan is long term and I'll check back and let you all know how it goes. It's obvious. You have to mount him and bite his ear to show dominance. It's the only way. Pro tip. Don't piss off the guy that'll be helping to decide where you live when you're too old to wash yourself. My dad always calls my boyfriend's watch his face until he gains respect for the guy. My current boyfriend just recently got his name privilege, which has happened I think twice. My daughter has been kicking ass and taking names since she was 3 months old. I have no worries whatsoever that she'll be able to take care of herself when she starts stepping out with boys in the next few years. I was the boyfriend. First time meeting her family. Her mother says, I think I saw their car and leaves the room. He looks at his daughter and asked, did you prepare him? Dot. She looks at me with a big WTF face. He gets 3 shots glasses. Gives all 3 of us a shot of Jennifer. We all drank it. The doorbell rings. He looks at me and says, we're going to need this, and gives us all 3 another shot. They people who came that night were lovely. No need to take shots and never saw him drinking after that. Probably gonna get buried. And obligatory not the father. My sister's first real boyfriend was from about 3 hours away, and she brought him to the house for the first time without telling us they were coming. My father and I had no intention of messing with him. Due to some poor planning on my sister's part, they show up on the Saturday before the start of hunting season. At the time my father and I were sighting in the hunting rifles up the field at around 500 yards. Completely unintentional. But if I had been in his shoes I would have it myself. Edit. Spelling. I call this the worst first date experience thanks to my dad. I had moved to a new school in the 3rd grade and fell in elementary love with a boy wearing those pants that unzip to reveal shorter pants, or shorts. It was not until the 5th grade, after endless diary entries and tampered with MASH outcomes, that my crush finally asked me out on a date. My dad immediately said no, and I sobbed. I sobbed and sobbed, until my mother talked my dad into letting me go. The only problem was, he was coming too. I decided not to tell my crush that my father would be attending the date with us, but instead pretended to be just as confused as he was that an older man was sitting directly behind us during the movie. The movie was Just Married. My poor crush tried to put his arm around me, and I felt my face flush as a voice from behind us said, "You want to keep that arm?" My father laughs to this day about how far we were leaning away from each other after that, and is very pleased with himself that he ended any affectionate advances. What my dad doesn't know is that we kissed every recess after that date until our terribly dramatic breakup on the soccer field.